Send her away before the season begins. I won't have her ruining Honoria's chances." The words slithered through the crack in the study door, sharp and deliberate. Lord Caelan Thornwood, Duke of Velmore, went very still in the adjacent parlor, his tea growing cold in his hands. "My dear, surely that's unnecessary." A man's voice, weak with appeasement. "Unnecessary?" The woman's laugh was brittle as broken glass. "She's plain, awkward, and every eligible man who might have looked at Honoria will waste his time pitying the late wife's daughter instead. Send her to your sister in Northumberland. Tell everyone she's ill. Tell them anything. Just make her disappear." Caelan set down his cup without a sound. He'd come to Briarwood Manor on a matter of business. His solicitor had discovered an old entailment dispute between the Thornwood and Ashford estates that required Lord Hadrian Ashford's signature. A simple errand, a brief inconvenience. He had not expected to hear a woman being erased. "Morwenna, Sibella is my daughter." Lord Ashford's voice carried the exhausted tone of a man who had lost this argument many times before. "Her mother would have wanted. Her mother is dead." Lady Morwenna Ashford's words cut like a blade. "And I am very much alive. The girl is 23 years old, Hadrian. 23. She's had 4 seasons, and not a single offer. She's a failure, and failures drag others down with them. I won't have her shadowing Honoria's debut like some specter of inadequacy. She's hardly had a fair chance. You've kept her in the background at every event, dressed her in colors that wash her out. Because she has nothing to recommend her. No beauty, no charm, no accomplishment worth mentioning. She reads too much, speaks too directly, and has the social grace of a startled hare. A rustle of silk, footsteps pacing. I've done my duty by her for 7 years. Hadrian. 7 years of feeding and clothing another woman's child. I deserve to see my own daughter succeed, without that burden weighing us down." Silence stretched. Caelan found his jaw had tightened to the point of pain. "Where would you send her?" Lord Ashford asked finally, and the defeat in his voice was complete. "Your sister Prudence in Northumberland. The woman's practically a hermit. No one will think to look for Sibella there, and by the time the season ends, Honoria will be engaged to someone suitable, and we can invent some story about Sibella recovering from a nervous condition." Lady Morwenna's tone brightened with satisfaction. "It's really the kindest solution for everyone, including her. She'll be happier away from the comparisons. And if she refuses, she won't. She never does. That's the only useful quality she possesses. Obedience." Footsteps approached the door. Caelan rose smoothly, positioning himself by the window, as if he'd been admiring the gardens all along. The study door opened, and Lady Morwenna Ashford swept into the parlor. She was handsome in a cold, polished way. Sharp cheekbones, calculating eyes, a smile that never quite reached her face. She stopped when she saw him, and for a moment, something flickered across her expression. Surprise? Concern? It vanished instantly behind gracious composure. "Your Grace, forgive us for keeping you waiting. My husband will see you now." Her curtsy was perfectly executed. "I trust you've been comfortable." "Perfectly," Caelan said, voice neutral. "Your home is lovely." "You're too kind." She glided past him, and Caelan watched her go, cataloging everything. The expensive silk of her gown, the emeralds at her throat, the way she moved through the house like she owned it, which, he supposed, she did now. 7 years. She'd been raising the first wife's daughter for 7 years. Lord Ashford appeared in the doorway, a man who looked older than his 50 years. His shoulders slumped, his eyes tired, his entire bearing that of someone who had surrendered long ago. "Your Grace, please come in. I apologize for the delay. Family matters." "Of course." Kalen followed him into the study. I understand completely. He did understand. He understood that Lord Ashford was a coward who had traded his daughter's happiness for domestic peace. He understood that Lady Morwenna was a calculating woman who viewed stepdaughters as obstacles rather than family. He understood that somewhere in this house, a young woman named Sibella was about to be discarded like an inconvenient piece of furniture. And he understood, with a clarity that surprised him, that he was not going to let that happen. The business was concluded in 20 minutes. The entailment dispute required nothing more than a signature and a handshake. Lord Ashford seemed relieved to have something simple to focus on, some task that didn't require him to choose between his wife and his conscience. "Will you stay for dinner, Your Grace?" Lord Ashford asked as they concluded. "My wife would be honored. I'm afraid I must decline. However." Kalen paused, as if the thought had just occurred to him. "There is another matter I hope to discuss. My mother, the Dowager Duchess, has been unwell these past months. The physicians recommend companionship and distraction. She's been asking after the daughter of her old friend, Isabel Ashford, I believe. Your first wife." Lord Ashford blinked. "Isabel?" "Yes. She and your mother were close, before she passed. Yes. My mother speaks of her often." This was not entirely a lie. The Dowager Duchess had mentioned Isabel Ashford once, years ago in passing. It would have to be enough. "She's expressed a wish to know Isabel's daughter, to have her as a companion during the season, a connection to happier times." "Sibella?" Lord Ashford's face shifted through confusion, hope, and then wariness. "Aye, that's very kind, Your Grace. But I'm not certain." "I understand she hasn't yet secured an engagement." Kalen kept his tone light, conversational. "A season at Velmore House, under the Dowager Duchess's patronage, might improve her prospects considerably. My mother's endorsement carries weight." It was true. The Dowager Duchess of Velmore was one of the most respected women in society. Her approval could launch a debutante into the highest circles. Her disapproval could sink one entirely. Lord Ashford's eyes widened as the implications settled. "You're offering to sponsor my daughter's season?" "I'm offering my mother's companionship and guidance. The sponsorship would be a natural consequence." Kalen smiled, the expression carefully calibrated to appear benevolent rather than calculating. "Unless, of course, you have other plans for her?" The silence stretched. Kalen watched Lord Ashford wrestle with the impossible gift that had just landed in his lap, a gift that would directly contradict his wife's orders, that would pull Sibella into the very spotlight Lady Morwenna wanted to deny her. "I would need to discuss it with my wife," Lord Ashford said weakly. "Of course, though I should mention." Kalen let the pause linger. "My mother specifically requested Miss Sibella Ashford. She was quite clear on that point. It would be difficult to explain a refusal without revealing that the Ashford family considers a duchess's invitation beneath them. It was a trap, elegant and inescapable. Refuse and risk offending one of the most powerful families in England. Accept, and Lady Morwenna's plans crumbled to ash. Lord Ashford swallowed hard. When would she need to arrive? Within the fortnight. The season begins soon, and my mother is eager. I'll speak with Morwenna tonight." "Excellent." Kalen rose, extending his hand. "I look forward to welcoming Miss Ashford to Velmore House. I'm certain she and my mother will find much to discuss." He was halfway to the door when Lord Ashford spoke again, voice strained. "Your Grace, why? Why would you do this for a girl you've never met?" Kalen turned. For a moment he considered telling the truth. "Because I heard your wife call her a burden. Because I watched you fail to defend her. Because someone should fight for her, even if you won't." Instead, he said simply. My mother asked. I am not in the habit of refusing her. He left Briarwood Manor with the afternoon sun warm on his face and a knot of something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. He had just invited a stranger into his home, a stranger he'd never seen, never spoken to, whose only recommendation was that she was about to be thrown away by the people who should have protected her. It was impulsive, reckless, completely unlike him. And yet, as his carriage pulled away, Caelan found he didn't regret it at all. He only wondered what Sabella Ashford would think when she learned that her life was about to change, and that a duke she'd never met had been the one to change it. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, sealed with the Thornwood crest in deep crimson wax. Sabella Ashford read it 3 times before the words made sense. The Dowager Duchess of Velmore requests the pleasure of your companionship for the duration of the season. Velmore House, London. She looked up at her father, who stood by the window, refusing to meet her eyes. I don't understand. It's an invitation. His voice was flat. From the Dowager Duchess. She was a friend of your mother's, apparently. Mother never mentioned. Your mother mentioned many things you were too young to remember. He turned, finally, and something in his expression made Sabella's chest tighten. Guilt. He looked guilty. This is an opportunity, Sabella. The Duchess's patronage could change everything for you. Could it? Sabella kept her voice carefully neutral. She had learned over 7 years to keep her voice carefully neutral. It was safer that way. Her stepmother swept into the room, and the temperature dropped. Lady Morwenna's smile was fixed in place, brittle as ice over a frozen pond. Sabella, darling, such wonderful news. The Dowager Duchess herself requesting your company. How fortunate. The word fortunate dripped with venom. I thought, Sabella said slowly, that I was to visit Aunt Prudence in Northumberland. Something flickered in her stepmother's eyes. Rage, quickly suppressed. Plans change. This is a far superior arrangement. You'll have access to the finest society, the best opportunities. Everything we could have hoped for you. Everything we could have hoped, as if Lady Morwenna had ever hoped for anything but Sabella's disappearance. When do I leave? Sabella asked. Friday. The Duke of Velmore himself has offered to escort you to London. His estate borders ours to the north. He'll collect you in his carriage. Her stepmother's smile tightened. How generous of him. The Duke of Velmore. Sabella knew the name, of course. Everyone knew the name. Lord Caelan Thornwood, 31 years old, unmarried, wealthy beyond measure, and notoriously selective about his company. He attended few social events, took no mistresses that anyone knew of, and had rejected every marriage prospect his mother had presented for the past decade. And now he was personally escorting her to London. Why? The question escaped before Sabella could stop it. Why would a duke trouble himself with— Does it matter? Lady Morwenna cut in sharply. You've been given an extraordinary opportunity. Try not to ruin it with your usual awkwardness. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. And for heaven's sake, wear something that doesn't make you look like a governess. The door clicked shut. Sabella stood in the silence, the letter still clutched in her hands, trying to understand how her life had just shifted beneath her feet. The Duke arrived precisely at 10 on Friday morning. Sabella watched from her bedroom window as the carriage rolled up the drive. Gleaming black lacquer, matched gray horses, the Thornwood crest emblazoned in gold on the door. It was the kind of carriage that announced its owner's wealth without shouting it. Confident, restrained, powerful. The door opened, and he stepped out. She'd seen the Duke of Velmore once before, 3 years ago, at the Whitford ball. He'd been standing alone near the terrace doors, watching the dancers with an expression of profound boredom. She remembered thinking that he looked like a man who had been carved from marble and accidentally given breath, handsome, cold, and utterly untouchable. He looked the same now. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair swept back from a face all sharp angles and controlled intensity. His eyes, even from this distance, seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. Why was he here? Why had he done this? A knock at her door. "Miss Sibella, the Duke is waiting." She descended the stairs with her heart pounding against her ribs. Her stepmother stood in the entrance hall, smile firmly in place, performing gracious hospitality for their distinguished guest. Honoria hovered nearby, golden curls perfectly arranged, watching Sibella with barely concealed resentment. And the Duke was looking at her. Not through her, not past her, not at some point over her shoulder. At her. His gray eyes tracked her descent with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Miss Ashford." His voice was low, smooth, and utterly unreadable. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Finally, as if he'd been waiting. "The pleasure is mine, Your Grace," she curtsied, grateful that her voice remained steady. "I'm deeply honored by your mother's invitation. She's eager to meet you. She speaks often of your mother." Something flickered in his expression, too fast to read. I understand they were close. "So, I'm told." Sibella had no memory of this alleged friendship. Her mother had died when she was 16, and in the years since, her father had rarely spoken of her. I look forward to hearing the Dowager Duchess's memories. I'm certain she'll be happy to share them. Silence fell. Lady Morwenna stepped forward, filling it with practiced charm. "Your Grace, won't you stay for refreshment before your journey? The roads can be so tedious." "Thank you, but no. We should depart if we're to reach London before dark." His gaze hadn't left Sibella's face. "Miss Ashford, are you ready?" She wasn't ready. She was not remotely ready for any of this. For London, for the Dowager Duchess, for a season under the patronage of one of the most powerful families in England. She was not ready to spend hours in a carriage with a man who looked at her like he was solving a puzzle she didn't know she'd presented. But she had learned, long ago, that readiness was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Yes, Your Grace," she said. "I'm ready." The carriage was as impressive inside as out. Burgundy velvet seats worn soft with age, polished brass fittings that caught the morning light, windows framed with silk curtains the color of aged wine. The air smelled faintly of leather and cedar, masculine and warm. Sibella settled onto the bench across from the Duke, acutely aware of how the space seemed to shrink with him in it, how his long legs nearly touched hers, how his presence filled every corner of the carriage's interior. She folded her hands in her lap, trying to make herself as small and unobtrusive as possible. Old habits, hard to break. The Duke said nothing as the carriage lurched into motion. He simply watched her, that same assessing gaze, as if cataloging everything about her and finding it. What? Wanting? Interesting. She couldn't tell. The silence stretched, broken only by the creak of wheels and the steady rhythm of hooves on the road. Sibella found herself studying the carriage's details to avoid his eyes. The brass handle worn smooth by countless hands, the small scratch on the window frame, anything but the man across from her. "You're uncomfortable," he said finally. It wasn't a question. Sibella felt her cheeks heat. "I'm unaccustomed to such generosity from strangers, Your Grace. We're not strangers. Our families have been neighbors for generations. And yet we've never spoken before today. No." He tilted his head slightly. "We haven't. Does that trouble you?" "It makes me wonder why you're speaking to me now." The words came out sharper than she intended. Sibella braced herself for displeasure. She had learned over 7 years. that men of rank did not appreciate being questioned by women of none. But the Duke only smiled, a small smile, barely there, but real. My mother asked for you specifically. I am merely honoring her request. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It isn't. Silence again. The carriage swayed gently as it turned onto the main road. Sibella stared out the window at the passing countryside. The hedgerows bright with spring growth, the distant spire of a village church, a farmer leading his plow horse across a field, intensely aware of his presence across from her. The breadth of his shoulders, the stillness of his hands resting on his thighs, the way he occupied space like a man who had never been denied anything. Your stepmother, he said abruptly, seems displeased by this arrangement. Sibella's breath caught. I couldn't say, Your Grace. Couldn't you? His voice was mild, but something in it made her look at him directly. His eyes were intent, searching. She seemed quite eager to see you go to Northumberland instead. The blood drained from her face. How do you? The walls at Briarwood Manor are thinner than Lady Morwenna realizes. He'd heard. God in heaven, he'd heard everything. Your Grace, I don't require explanations. He leaned back against the seat, expression unreadable. I merely wanted you to know that I understand the situation you're leaving behind, and that you won't find the same treatment at Velmore House. Sibella's throat tightened. Pity. This was pity. He'd heard her stepmother call her a burden, a failure, an obstacle to be removed, and now he was rescuing her like some broken-winged bird. I don't need charity, she said, and the words came out hard, defensive. Good, because I'm not offering any. His gaze held hers. My mother genuinely did know yours, and she genuinely does want your company. I merely expedited the invitation. Why? The question hung between them, sharp and unavoidable. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, quietly, because someone should have asked you what you wanted, and no one did. Sibella felt something crack in her chest, a fissure in the wall she'd built around herself, the wall that kept her safe, kept her small, kept her invisible. You don't know me, she whispered. No, he agreed, but I'd like to. The carriage rolled on toward London, and Sibella sat in the swaying silence, trying to remember how to breathe. Velmore House was a palace. Sibella had expected grandeur. The Thornwoods were one of the oldest families in England, their wealth legendary. But the reality still stole her breath. The London townhouse rose 4 stories high, its facade gleaming white stone and tall windows that caught the afternoon light. Footmen in immaculate livery lined the entrance. A butler, who looked like he'd been carved from the same stone as the building, greeted them with perfect, impassive courtesy. And everywhere, evidence of a life she'd only glimpsed from the margins of society. Crystal chandeliers, silk wallpaper, paintings by masters whose names she'd only read in books, and a sweeping staircase that seemed to float upward into infinity. Miss Ashford. She turned. The Duke stood at the base of the stairs, watching her take in his home with an expression she couldn't read. My mother is resting, but she's asked to meet you for tea at 4. Mrs. Pemberton will show you to your rooms and help you settle in. He gestured to an older woman in severe black who had materialized beside him. If you need anything at all, you have only to ask. Thank you, Your Grace. He nodded once, turned, and disappeared down a corridor without another word. Sibella stared after him, that fissure in her chest widening. Why? The question kept circling back. Why would a man of his position, his power, his utter disinterest in society's machinations, involve himself in the fate of a nobody like her? Miss Ashford? Mrs. Pemberton's voice was kind, but efficient. If you'll follow me. The rooms assigned to her were larger than the entire upper floor of her space at Briarwood. A sitting room done in soft blues and creams, a bedroom with a four-poster bed draped in embroidered silk, a dressing room stocked with gowns she had never seen before. Gowns in rich, jeweled tones, nothing like the washed-out pastels her stepmother had insisted upon. "The Dowager Duchess had these made for you," Mrs. Pemberton said, noting her shocked expression. "She remembered your mother's coloring. Said you'd likely have the same." Sibella touched the sleeve of a deep emerald gown, the fabric impossibly soft beneath her fingers. Her mother's coloring. Dark hair, pale skin, eyes that her father had once called the color of winter storms. She'd been dressed in pinks and yellows for 7 years, colors that made her look sallow, faded, and forgettable. Had her stepmother known? Had she chosen those colors deliberately? Of course she had. Sibella had always known, somewhere beneath the surface. She'd simply never allowed herself to acknowledge it. "The Dowager Duchess is very thoughtful," she managed. "She's been counting the days since the Duke's letter arrived." Mrs. Pemberton's expression softened slightly. "She speaks of your mother often. Says she was the truest friend she ever had." The truest friend. And yet Sibella had never heard of this friendship until 4 days ago. What else had been hidden from her? What else had been erased? Tea with the Dowager Duchess was nothing like Sibella expected. She'd braced herself for interrogation, for the sharp assessment of a powerful woman evaluating a potential project. She'd prepared answers for questions about her education, her accomplishments, her prospects, all the things that defined a young woman's value in the marriage market. Instead, Lady Helena Thornwood took one look at her, burst into tears, and pulled her into an embrace that smelled of lavender and wool. "Oh, my dear girl, you look exactly like her. Exactly." Sibella stood frozen, arms at her sides, unsure what to do with this unexpected flood of emotion. "Forgive me," the Dowager Duchess said, pulling back and dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "I promised myself I wouldn't become a watering pot. But seeing you standing there, in this room, where Isabel and I used to take tea together." Her voice broke. "For 7 years I've tried to reach you, and I still miss your mother every day. You really were friends." The words came out small, uncertain, the closest of friends, from girlhood until— Lady Helena stopped, composed herself. "Until your father remarried, and his new wife made it clear that connections to the previous Lady Ashford were no longer welcome." Sibella felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Lady Morwenna forbade the connection. Not in so many words. But the invitations I sent were never answered. The letters I wrote were returned unopened. When I tried to visit Briarwood, I was told you were indisposed." Lady Helena's eyes, gray like her son's, held a profound sadness. "I should have tried harder. I should have fought. But I was grieving my own husband at the time, and She shook her head. "I failed your mother. I failed you, and I've regretted it every day since. I know my son told your father I was unwell," Lady Helena added, a rueful smile crossing her face. "A small exaggeration, I confess. A pretext to make the invitation more urgent. Forgive the deception. I couldn't risk your stepmother finding a reason to refuse." 7 years. For 7 years, this woman had been trying to reach her, and Sibella had never known. "My stepmother told me I had no connections," she whispered. "No friends of my mother's who might help. She said I was alone. You were never alone. You were hidden." Lady Helena took her hands, grip fierce despite her frail appearance. "But you're here now, and I intend to make up for every lost year, starting with this season. Your Grace, I don't—" Sibella swallowed hard. "I'm not accomplished. I'm not beautiful. I've had 4 seasons and not a single offer. Whatever you're hoping to achieve with me, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed." "Disappointed?" Lady Helena laughed, a warm sound that filled the room. "My dear girl, I'm not hoping to achieve anything except getting to know my dearest friend's daughter. If a suitable match develops, wonderful. If not, you'll still have a home here, with me, for as long as you want one." A home. The word hit Sabella like a physical blow. She hadn't had a home, a real home, one where she was wanted, since her mother died. "I don't know what to say," she managed. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll give this season a real chance. Not the half chances you've been given before, with dresses designed to make you invisible and invitations to events where no one knew your name." Lady Helena's eyes sharpened. "I know what Morwenna's been doing. Kaelin told me everything." Kaelin, the Duke, who had somehow overheard her stepmother's cruelty and decided to intervene. "Why did he do it?" Sabella asked. "Why does he care what happens to a stranger?" Lady Helena studied her for a long moment. "That's a question you should ask him directly." "I did. He didn't answer." "Then perhaps he doesn't know yet." The Dowager Duchess smiled, something knowing in her expression. "My son is a complicated man, Miss Ashford. He spent 31 years building walls around himself, keeping everyone at a careful distance. But something about your situation reached him in a way I haven't seen in years. Pity," Sabella said flatly. "He pities me." "Do you truly believe that?" She thought of the carriage ride, the way he'd looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her, the way he'd said, "Someone should have asked you what you wanted." "I don't know what I believe," she admitted. "Then give yourself time to find out." Lady Helena squeezed her hands once more, then released them. "Now, let's discuss the season. The first ball is in 10 days, and we have work to do." Over the following week, Sabella learned that the Dowager Duchess's version of work was considerably more intensive than anything she'd experienced at Briarwood. There were fittings for gowns, dozens of them, in colors that made her skin glow instead of fade. Consultations with milliners, haberdashers, and a formidable woman who specialized in teaching deportment to young ladies who had been incorrectly educated. "You walk like you're trying to disappear," the deportment instructor said on the 3rd day, frowning. "Shoulders hunched, eyes down, steps too small. Who taught you to move like that?" No one had taught her. She'd learned it herself, through years of trying to take up as little space as possible, to avoid drawing attention, to become invisible before her stepmother could criticize whatever was visible. "Stand straight. Chin up. Walk like you own the room, not like you're apologizing for existing in it." Easy to say. Harder to do after 7 years of training herself to do the opposite. But she tried. Every day she tried. And every day she saw the Duke. He was present at breakfast, usually buried in correspondence or newspapers, speaking little. He appeared occasionally at dinner when his mother insisted, making polite conversation that never quite reached warmth. He passed her in corridors, nodded in acknowledgement, and continued on his way without pause. He was unfailingly courteous, unfailingly distant, unfailingly impossible to read. And yet, there were moments, small moments that she couldn't quite explain. The morning she came down early and found him alone in the breakfast room, staring out the window with an expression of profound exhaustion. He'd looked up when she entered, and for just a second, the mask had slipped. She'd seen something raw underneath, something lonely. The afternoon she'd been practicing her deportment walk in the garden, not realizing anyone was watching, and had turned to find him on the terrace above. He'd inclined his head slightly, almost a bow, and the corner of his mouth had curved in what might have been a smile. The evening she'd stumbled on the stairs, tired and overwhelmed, and his hand had shot out to steady her before she even knew he was there. His grip had been warm, firm, and surprisingly gentle. He'd held her just a moment too long before releasing her and stepping back. "Careful, Miss Ashford," he'd said, voice low. "It would be a shame to ruin my mother's plans with a broken ankle." "Your mother's plans," she'd echoed. "Not yours?" He'd paused. Something had flickered in his eyes. That same, unreadable intensity. "My mother's plans and mine are not always the same. And what are your plans, Your Grace?" He'd studied her for a long moment. Then, quietly, "I'm still determining that." He'd walked away, and Sibella had stood alone on the stairs, her arm still tingling where he'd touched her, wondering what on earth was happening. She didn't trust it. Couldn't trust it. Men like the Duke of Velmore did not interest themselves in women like her. Plain, awkward, invisible women with no fortune and no connections. And yet he kept appearing, kept watching, kept looking at her like she was something worth seeing. It was dangerous. Whatever this was, it was dangerous. Because Sibella Ashford had spent 23 years learning to expect nothing. And hope, she had discovered, was the cruelest weapon of all. The night before the Haversham ball, Sibella's first official event under the Dowager Duchess's patronage, she couldn't sleep. She lay in the magnificent bed, staring at the canopy above, her mind racing through every possible disaster. She would trip. She would say something foolish. She would stand against the wall all evening, invisible, proving to everyone that Lady Morwenna had been right all along. A failure, a burden, an obstacle. At 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep entirely and crept downstairs to the library. Reading had always been her refuge, the one place where she could disappear into someone else's story and forget the inadequacy of her own. The library at Velmore House was vast, a 2-story cathedral of books, with rolling ladders and deep leather chairs and the lingering scent of old paper and wood polish. She'd discovered it on her second day and had been finding excuses to return ever since. What she hadn't expected was to find it already occupied. The Duke sat in one of the leather chairs near the dying fire, a glass of something amber in his hand, staring at the flames with an expression of such profound weariness that Sibella froze in the doorway. He looked up. The weariness vanished, replaced by that familiar, unreadable mask. "Miss Ashford, you should be asleep." "So should you, Your Grace." The words came out before she could stop them. She braced herself for censure. Speaking to a duke with such familiarity was not done, especially by a woman in her position. But he only smiled. That small, barely there smile she'd seen once before in the carriage. Touché. She should leave, should apologize, and retreat to her room and pretend this never happened. But her feet carried her forward instead, into the warm glow of the firelight, toward the chair across from his. "May I?" He gestured with his glass. "Please." She sat. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but charged with something she couldn't name. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed the quarter hour. "You're nervous about tomorrow," he said finally. "Not a question." "Is it that obvious?" "You've been wound tight as a bowstring all week. My mother noticed. The deportment instructor noticed. Even Mrs. Pemberton noticed, and she notices very little that doesn't involve household management." Sibella felt heat climb her cheeks. "I apologize if I've been difficult." "You haven't been difficult. You've been terrified." His eyes met hers, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. "What are you afraid of, Miss Ashford?" Everything. She was afraid of everything. Of failing publicly. of proving her stepmother right, of hoping for something better and having that hope crushed, of whatever was happening between them, this strange tension that made her skin prickle whenever he was near. "I'm afraid," she said slowly, "of being seen." His brow furrowed. "I don't understand. For 7 years, I've made myself invisible. It was safer that way. If no one noticed me, no one could criticize me. If I took up no space, I couldn't be accused of taking up too much." She stared at the fire, unable to meet his eyes. "And now your mother wants to put me on display in front of all of London, and I don't know how to be seen anymore. I've forgotten how." Silence. Then quietly, "You've never been invisible to me." Her head snapped up. He was watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. Something raw, something unguarded. The mask had slipped again, and underneath it was a man who looked almost as lost as she felt. "From the moment I heard your stepmother speak about you," he continued, voice low, "I saw you. Not the version she described, the burden, the failure, the obstacle. I saw someone who had been systematically erased by people who should have cherished her. And I thought—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "What did you think?" "I thought that someone needed to remind her she existed, that she mattered." His eyes held hers, that she deserved to be seen. Sibella couldn't breathe. The air between them had grown thick, heavy with words neither of them was saying. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "You don't know me." "I know enough." He set down his glass, leaning forward. "I know you've been treated abominably by people who should have protected you. I know you've spent years shrinking yourself to survive. I know you're braver than you realize. Coming here, accepting my mother's invitation, preparing to walk into a ballroom full of strangers who will judge you on sight." His voice dropped. "And I know that when you finally stop being afraid, you're going to astonish everyone, including yourself." Tears burned behind her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "You can't know that. Can't I?" He rose from his chair and crossed to hers, dropping to one knee so their eyes were level. This close, she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the gray of his irises that shifted like storm clouds. "Tomorrow night," he said, "you're going to walk into the Haversham ball on my arm, not my mother's. Mine. And every person in that room is going to see exactly what I see. A woman who has been underestimated her entire life. A woman who is about to prove everyone wrong." "Your arm?" Her voice came out strangled. "But that will— people will talk. Let them." His hand covered hers, warm and solid. "I told you in the carriage that I wanted to know you. I meant it. And if escorting you tomorrow is the first step toward that, then I'll gladly endure whatever gossip follows." She should pull away. Should remind him of the impropriety, the implications, the 1,000 reasons why a duke should not kneel before a nobody in a darkened library at 2 in the morning. But his hand was warm, and his eyes were sincere, and for the first time in 7 years, someone was looking at her like she mattered. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, one last time. He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Because I've spent my whole life watching from the margins, keeping myself apart, convincing myself that distance was the same as safety. And then I heard your stepmother call you invisible, and I realized—" He stopped, something flickering across his face. "I realized I'd been making myself invisible too, just in a different way." Before she could respond, he rose, releasing her hand. "Get some sleep, Miss Ashford. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." He walked out of the library without looking back. Sibella sat alone in the firelight, her hand still tingling where he'd touched her, wondering if she'd just imagined the entire conversation. She hadn't imagined it, but she wasn't sure she understood it either, and she was beginning to suspect that the Duke of Velmore was far more dangerous than any ballroom full of judgmental strangers. The Haversham Ball was a crush of silk and candlelight and the overwhelming scent of hothouse flowers. Sibella stood at the entrance to the ballroom, her hand resting on the Duke's arm, and felt every eye in the room turn toward them. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Fans fluttered, heads bent together. "Steady," Kaelin murmured, so low only she could hear. "You're doing beautifully." She wasn't doing beautifully. She was trembling, her heart racing, her breath coming too fast. But his arm was solid beneath her fingers, and his presence beside her was an anchor in the storm. They descended the stairs together. The Dowager Duchess had entered separately, already holding court near the refreshment tables, but Kaelin had insisted on escorting Sibella himself. "People will talk," she'd warned him again in the carriage. "Good," he'd replied. "Let them have something interesting to discuss for once." And they were talking. Oh, they were talking. She could see it in the sharp glances, the raised eyebrows, the way conversations paused as they passed. Who is she? The whispers followed them like shadows. The Ashford girl? The plain one? Why is Velmore? She forced herself to keep her chin up, her shoulders back, her steps measured. Walk like you own the room. She didn't own anything. But perhaps for tonight she could pretend. The first hour passed in a blur of introductions. The Dowager Duchess presented her to what felt like half the aristocracy. Lords and ladies whose names blurred together, matrons who assessed her with calculating eyes, young men who bowed politely and then looked past her toward more glittering prospects. But Kaelin stayed close. Not hovering, not possessive, just present. A steady warmth at her side that made everything else bearable. "You're attracting attention," he said during a brief lull, when they'd retreated to a quieter corner near the terrace doors. "Unwanted attention. Not all of it unwanted." His eyes swept the room. "Lord Pemberton has been watching you for the past 20 minutes, and Sir Aldrich Vane hasn't stopped staring since we arrived." Sibella followed his gaze and found a man across the room, tall, golden-haired, classically handsome, in a way that belonged on a painted portrait. He was watching her with undisguised interest, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Who is he?" "Sir Aldrich Vane, second son of the Earl of Thornbury, charming, well-connected, and perpetually in need of funds." Something tightened in Kaelin's voice. "He's been looking for a wealthy bride for 3 seasons now." "I'm not wealthy." "No, but you're under my mother's patronage, which suggests you might be. And you're—" He stopped abruptly. "I'm what?" He didn't answer. Sir Aldrich was approaching, cutting through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man who had never doubted his welcome anywhere. "Your Grace." He bowed to Kaelin, then turned to Sibella with a smile that seemed designed to dazzle. "And you must be Miss Ashford. I've heard so much about you." "Have you?" Sibella kept her voice neutral. "I wasn't aware I warranted discussion." A mysterious young woman appearing from nowhere under the Dowager Duchess's wing? "You're the most interesting thing to happen all season." His eyes, blue, bright, knowing, swept over her appreciatively. "I must confess, the rumors don't do you justice." "What rumors?" "That you're plain." His smile widened. Clearly, whoever started them was either blind or trying to keep you to themselves. It was flattery, obvious and practiced, but Sibella felt her cheeks warm anyway. No one had ever called her interesting. No one had ever suggested she was worth keeping. "Sir Aldrich," Kaelin said, and his voice had gone cold. "I didn't realize you'd returned to London." "Just last week. The countryside was growing tedious." Sir Aldrich's attention remained fixed on Sibella, Miss Ashford, might I have the honor of the next dance?" She hesitated, glancing at Kalen. His expression was carefully blank, but something in his eyes. "Miss Ashford promised the next dance to me," Kalen said smoothly. "Perhaps the one after?" It was a lie. She had promised him nothing. But Sir Aldrich only smiled, unruffled. "Of course. I'll find you later, Miss Ashford. I look forward to becoming better acquainted." He melted back into the crowd. Sibella turned to Kalen, questions burning on her tongue. "I didn't promise you anything." "No, you didn't." He extended his hand. "But I'm asking now. Will you dance with me?" She should refuse. Should tell him that whatever game he was playing, she wanted no part of it. But his hand was outstretched, and the music was beginning, and something in his eyes made her chest ache. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'll dance with you." The waltz was a revelation. She had danced before, awkward, stiff affairs with partners who held her at arm's length and counted steps under their breath. But dancing with Kalen was different. His hand at her waist was firm, guiding. His movements were fluid, confident, and effortless. He led her through the turns like they'd been doing this for years. The heat of his palms seeped through the silk of her gown, warming her skin beneath. She was acutely aware of every point of contact, his fingers laced with hers, his breath stirring the loose curls at her temple, the way his thigh brushed against her skirts as they turned. The room spun around them in a blur of candlelight and color, but he was the only fixed point, the only thing that felt real. "You're a good dancer," she said, surprised. "You sound shocked. You don't seem like someone who enjoys dancing." "I don't, usually." His grip tightened slightly as they spun, pulling her a fraction closer than propriety allowed. "But this is different." "Different how?" He didn't answer immediately. His thumb traced a small circle against her palm. Unconscious, perhaps, but it sent sparks racing up her arm. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than before. "Because you're not counting steps. You're not performing. You're just here. With me. Where else would I be? Anywhere. Somewhere safer." His eyes held hers, and the intensity in them made her stomach flutter. The room blurred around them, the candles, the flowers, the watching crowds, until there was only him, only this, only the music carrying them forward. "Sir Aldrich," she said, needing to break the spell before she drowned in it. "You don't like him." "No." "Why?" "Because he's exactly the kind of man your stepmother would have chosen for you. Charming on the surface, empty underneath. The sort who marries for advantage and discards what he's married once it's no longer useful." The words hit harder than they should have. "You think he's interested in my supposed fortune?" "I think he's interested in whatever he can get, and I think—" Kalen stopped, jaw tightening. "What do you think?" "I think you deserve someone who sees you. Not your connections, not your potential value, not the patronage behind you." His voice dropped, intimate despite the crowded room. "You. Just you." The music swelled, then faded. The dance was ending. Other couples swirled around them, but Sibella couldn't move, couldn't look away from the storm in his eyes. "Kalen," she whispered, and it was the first time she'd used his name. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, heat, something that looked almost like pain. Then the mask slammed back into place. "Sir Aldrich is coming back," he said quietly. "Be careful with him, Miss Ashford. Please." He released her and stepped away, and a moment later, Sir Aldrich appeared at her elbow, smile firmly in place. "My dance, I believe." Sibella let him lead her onto the floor, but her eyes followed Kalen as he retreated toward the terrace. And she wondered, with a growing sense of unease, exactly what she had gotten herself into. Sir Aldrich Vane was everything charming, and nothing real. Sibella realized it slowly, over the course of 3 dances and an hour of conversation. He said all the right things, complimented her dress, her eyes, and her wit. He asked about her interests, her reading habits, her opinions on music. He made her laugh with stories of his travels and groaned about the tedium of country life. But underneath the polish, there was nothing, no depth, no substance, no genuine curiosity. He was performing interest, not feeling it. Every question was designed to elicit information, not connection. "You're not what I expected," he said as they stood near the refreshment table. The Ashford girl everyone whispered about was supposed to be plain and dull. You're neither. Perhaps the whisperers were misinformed. Or perhaps someone was deliberately hiding you. His eyes sharpened. Your stepmother, I hear, has quite a reputation for managing her family's image. Sibella went still. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? He leaned closer, voice dropping. I've heard things, Miss Ashford, about your seasons before this one, about the dresses you were given, the events you were steered toward, the way you were always positioned just out of sight. His smile turned knowing. Someone didn't want you to succeed. The words should have felt like validation. Instead, they felt like violation, her private humiliation laid bare by a stranger's prying. That's quite a lot of speculation, Sir Aldrich. Is it speculation? Or is it the truth that everyone's been too polite to say aloud? He straightened, expression shifting to something almost sympathetic. I'm not trying to cause you pain, Miss Ashford. I'm trying to help you understand the game you're playing. I'm not playing any game. Everyone plays games. The only question is whether you know the rules. He glanced across the room to where Kaelin stood in conversation with an elderly lord. Take the Duke, for instance. Why do you think he's taken such an interest in you? His mother was friends with mine. His mother? Sir Aldrich laughed softly. Yes, that's the official story, isn't it? The Dowager Duchess's sentiment for an old friendship. How touching. His eyes returned to hers. But the Duke doesn't do anything without calculation, Miss Ashford. He's spent a decade avoiding entanglements, refusing courtships, keeping everyone at arm's length, and suddenly he's escorting an unknown girl to balls and dancing with her like she's the only person in the room? He shook his head. That's not sentiment. That's strategy. Strategy for what? That's what I'm trying to determine. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive. Cloying. You're new to this world, Miss Ashford. You don't understand how it works. Men like Thornwood don't rescue damsels out of kindness. They acquire assets. And right now, you're an asset of unknown value. The words slithered into her chest and coiled there, cold and venomous. You don't know him, she said, but her voice wavered. I know his type. I know this world. Sir Aldrich's smile was almost gentle. I'm not your enemy, Miss Ashford. I'm the only person in this room willing to tell you the truth. Whatever the Duke's game is, you're a piece on his board, not a player. The sooner you understand that, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself. And what would you have me do? Reject his family's hospitality? Insult the Dowager Duchess? I would have you keep your eyes open. He pressed something into her hand, a card, his calling card. And I would have you know that there are other options, other people who might value you for yourself, not for whatever strategic purpose you serve. Before she could respond, he bowed and disappeared into the crowd. Sibella stood alone, the card clutched in her fingers, Sir Aldrich's words echoing in her skull. An asset of unknown value, a piece on his board. Was it true? Had she been fooling herself, believing that Kaelin's interest was genuine? He was a duke, one of the most powerful men in England. Why would he trouble himself with a nobody like her, unless there was something to gain. She thought of the library, the way he'd knelt before her, taken her hand, looked at her like she mattered. The things he'd said. I saw someone who had been systematically erased. Someone needed to remind her she existed. Had that been calculation too? A strategic performance designed to win her trust? She didn't know. She couldn't know. And the uncertainty was unbearable. "Miss Ashford," Kaylin's voice came from behind her. "Is everything all right? You look pale." She turned. He was watching her with concern, that same intensity she'd found so compelling and now found terrifying. "I'm fine, just tired." "Vane upset you?" It wasn't a question. His jaw tightened. "What did he say?" "Nothing of consequence." "Sibella," her name on his lips, low and urgent. "What did he say?" She met his eyes, and something cracked inside her. All the fear, all the doubt, and all the questions she'd been suppressing, they surged up at once. "He said you were playing a game, that you don't do anything without calculation, that I'm an asset, not a person." Her voice shook. "Is it true?" Kaylin went very still. "You believe him?" "I don't know what to believe." Tears burned behind her eyes. "I don't know you. I don't know why you're doing any of this. You heard my stepmother call me a burden, and suddenly you're rescuing me. And I don't understand why. And I need—" She stopped, breath catching. "I need you to tell me the truth." Silence stretched between them. Around them, the ball continued. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses. But Sibella heard none of it. There was only him, only this moment, only the question hanging in the air. "The truth," he said finally, "is that I don't know why I'm doing this either." She blinked. "What?" "I heard your stepmother, and something in me." He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "I've spent my entire life being careful, controlled, strategic. And then I heard her call you invisible, and I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't let you be erased." His eyes met hers, raw and unguarded. "I don't know what that means. I don't know what I want from you or from this. I only know that when I'm near you, I feel something I haven't felt in years, and it terrifies me." "Terrifies you," she repeated. "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. "Because I've built my entire life on control, on distance, on never letting anyone close enough to matter. And you," he shook his head, "you matter. Already. And I don't know what to do with that." Sibella stared at him, heart pounding, and Sir Aldrich's words dissolving like smoke. This wasn't calculation. This was a man standing on the edge of something he didn't understand, reaching for her in the dark, just like she was reaching for him. "What do we do?" she asked. "I don't know." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "But I know I don't want to stop. Whatever this is, wherever it leads, I don't want to walk away. Not yet. People will talk. Let them. Your reputation means nothing if I spend my life alone in a fortress I built myself." His grip tightened. "I'm tired of being invisible too, Sibella. I'm tired of watching life from the margins. And I think—" He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his face. "I think maybe we could learn to be seen together." A tear slipped down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb, the touch achingly gentle. "Don't cry," he murmured. "Not here. Not where they can see." "I'm not crying because I'm sad." She laughed, watery and broken. "I'm crying because I think I believe you. You should believe me. It's the most honest I've been in years." The music shifted, a new dance beginning. Neither of them moved. "Take me outside," she whispered. "Please. I need air." He led her through the crowd, out the terrace doors, into the cool darkness of the garden. The night air hit her like a blessing, sharp and clean after the suffocating heat of the ballroom. They stood together in the moonlight, hands still clasped, breathing the same silence. And Sibella realized, with a certainty that settled into her bones, that whatever came next, there was no going back. She had been seen, she had been chosen, and for the first time in her life, she was going to choose back. The garden at Haversham House was a labyrinth of hedges and moonlight, designed for exactly the kind of private conversations that shouldn't happen. Sibella and Kaelin walked in silence, their footsteps muffled by the grass, their hands still intertwined. The music from the ballroom drifted after them, faint and dreamlike, as if the world they'd left behind was already fading. "My mother will wonder where we've gone," Kaelin said finally. "Let her wonder." He glanced at her, surprised. "That's not like you." "Perhaps I'm tired of being like me." She stopped beneath a trellis heavy with climbing roses, their white petals glowing silver in the moonlight. "Perhaps I'm tired of being careful and cautious and invisible." "Perhaps," she turned to face him, "perhaps I want to be reckless for once." Something shifted in his expression. That careful control he wore like armor began to crack. "Sibella, you said you didn't want to walk away. Neither do I." She stepped closer, close enough to see the rapid pulse at his throat, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "But I need to know this is real. Not strategy, not obligation, not pity for the poor erased girl. I need to know that when you look at me, you see me. Not what I represent, not what you can gain. Me. I see you." His voice was rough, strained. "I've seen nothing but you since the moment I heard your name." "Then show me." The words hung between them, dangerous and electric. Kaelin's jaw worked. She could see the battle in him, duty warring with desire, control straining against something far more powerful. "If I show you," he said slowly, "there's no going back. You understand that? Whatever happens next, it changes everything. I know. Your reputation was never mine to begin with. It belonged to my stepmother, to society, to everyone who looked through me like I wasn't there." She lifted her chin. "I want something that's mine, even if it's just this moment, even if it's just tonight." He closed his eyes briefly, as if summoning strength. When he opened them, the control was gone. What remained was raw, hungry, utterly unguarded. "God help me," he breathed. "I've tried to resist this, tried to tell myself it was impossible, inappropriate, that I had no right." "You have every right." She reached up, her fingers brushing his jaw, feeling the roughness of stubble, the warmth of his skin. "Because I'm giving it to you." He made a sound, half groan, half surrender, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't gentle or tentative or careful. It was consuming, desperate, the release of something that had been building since the moment he'd knelt before her in the library. His hands came up to cup her face, tilting her head back, deepening the kiss until she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but feel. She clutched at his coat, pulling him closer, and he responded by pressing her back against the trellis, his body a wall of heat against hers. Rose petals showered down around them, catching in her hair, scattering across his shoulders. "Sibella." Her name was a prayer on his lips. "Tell me to stop. Tell me this is madness." "It is madness." She kissed him again, brief and fierce. "Don't stop." He didn't stop. His mouth traced down her throat, finding the pulse point that fluttered wildly beneath her skin. His hand slid from her face to her waist, pulling her impossibly closer. She arched into him, gasping, and her fingers tangling in his hair. This was ruin. She knew it. If anyone found them, she didn't care. For the first time in her life, she didn't care about consequences or propriety or what anyone might think. There was only him, only this, only the desperate, beautiful reality of being wanted. I've imagined this, he confessed against her skin, his breath hot on her collarbone. Every night since you arrived. Lying awake, telling myself it could never happen, that I had no right to want you this badly. I've imagined it too. She pulled back to meet his eyes, her hands framing his face. I thought I was foolish, dreaming about a duke who could never what? Love you? His laugh was broken, ragged. I think I've loved you since the moment you looked me in the eye and asked why I cared. No one asks me that. No one challenges me. No one sees past the title and the fortune and the walls I've built. But you didn't know who I was, what I could offer, and you challenged me anyway. Kaylin, I love you. The words came out fierce, certain, like a vow being sworn. I love your courage and your honesty, and the way you refuse to disappear no matter how hard the world tries to erase you. I love that you're terrified and you do things anyway. I love. His voice cracked, rough with emotion. I love you, and I know I shouldn't. I know this complicates everything, but I can't. I can't pretend anymore. Tears streamed down her face. She didn't try to stop them. I love you too. His forehead dropped to hers. They stood there, breathing each other's air, trembling on the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful. What do we do now? She whispered. I don't know, but I know I'm not letting you go. His arms tightened around her. Whatever comes, scandal, opposition, your stepmother, my obligations, we face it together. Do you understand? You're not invisible anymore. You're mine, and I protect what's mine. And you're mine. She kissed him again, softer this time, pouring everything she felt into it. I protect what's mine, too. They stayed in the garden until the music stopped, until the carriages began departing, until the moon had crossed half the sky. When they finally returned to the ballroom, disheveled and glowing, every eye turned toward them. Let them look, Sibella thought. Let them see. She was done hiding, done shrinking, done being erased. Whatever storm was coming, she would face it standing tall, and she wouldn't face it alone. The storm came faster than either of them expected. By noon the next day, the gossip had spread through London like wildfire. The Duke of Velmore and the mysterious Miss Ashford, seen emerging from the Haversham Gardens after midnight, her hair disordered, his cravat askew. The way they'd looked at each other, everyone had seen it. Everyone was talking. Sibella sat in her room at Velmore House, listening to the clock tick, waiting for the inevitable. It came in the form of a letter, delivered by a tight-lipped footman. Not from Kaylin, she hadn't seen him all morning, but from her father. Sibella, you have disgraced this family beyond repair. Lady Morwenna received 3 separate letters this morning, detailing your shameful behavior at the Haversham ball. Whatever spell you've cast on the Duke, it ends now. You will return to Briarwood immediately. A carriage will collect you at 4 o'clock. Do not attempt to contact Thornwood again. Whatever he promised you, it was a lie. Men like him do not marry women like you. They use them and discard them. Your disappointed father. Lord Hadrian Ashford, the words blurred through her tears. Disgraced. Shameful. Use them and discard them. A knock at her door. She wiped her eyes hastily. Come in. It was Mrs. Pemberton, her expression grave. Miss Ashford? The Dowager Duchess wishes to see you in her sitting room. Sibella's stomach dropped. This was it then. The Dowager Duchess had heard the gossip and was about to send her away in shame. She followed Mrs. Pemberton through the silent corridors, each step heavier than the last. When she entered the sitting room, Lady Helena was standing by the window, her face unreadable. Close the door, the Dowager Duchess said. Sibella obeyed, her hands trembling. Your Grace, I'm so sorry. I never meant to bring scandal to your house. Sit down, child. She sat. Lady Helena studied her for a long moment. Then, quietly, my son came to me this morning. He told me what happened in the garden. He told me he loves you. Sibella couldn't speak. He also told me he intends to marry you, regardless of the consequences. Lady Helena's expression remained unreadable. Do you love him? Yes. The word came out broken. More than I thought possible. And do you understand what marrying him would mean? The scandal won't disappear. Society will never fully accept you. There will always be whispers, always doubts, always people who believe you trapped him or manipulated him or... I understand. Do you? Lady Helena's voice sharpened. Because I've seen what society does to women who rise above their station. It's cruel, Miss Ashford. Relentless. They will try to break you. They've been trying to break me my whole life. Sibella lifted her chin. I'm still here. Something shifted in Lady Helena's expression. The severity softened into something almost like approval. Good, she said, because I received a letter this morning as well, from Lord Ashford. He demands your return. He threatens to publicly denounce any engagement between you and my son as fraudulent, claiming you seduced Caelan for his fortune. The blood drained from Sibella's face. That's not. I would never. I know. Lady Helena moved to sit beside her. I know who you are, Sibella. I knew your mother. You have her integrity, her strength, her refusal to be diminished. She took Sibella's hand. But your father's letter puts us in a difficult position. If he publicly opposes the match, it adds fuel to the scandal. People will believe him. You'll be painted as a schemer, and Caelan as a fool. Then perhaps, Sibella forced the words out, perhaps I should go, before this gets worse, before I ruin everything for him. Is that what you want? No. God, no. She wanted to stay, wanted to fight, wanted to believe that love was enough to overcome everything. But love wasn't enough. It never had been in stories like hers. What I want doesn't matter, she whispered. It never has. The door opened. Caelan stood in the doorway, his face pale and his eyes blazing. I heard, he said. Every word. Sibella rose, her heart shattering. Caelan. You're not leaving. His voice was steel. I don't care what your father says. I don't care what society says. You're not going back to that house, to those people who treated you like... He stopped, jaw working. I won't allow it. You can't stop it. Tears spilled over. Your mother is right. If my father denounces us, it ruins everything. Your reputation, your family's standing, everything you've built. I don't care about any of that. You should care. You have to care. She stepped toward him, pleading. I can't be the reason you lose everything. I can't. You're not taking this choice from me. He crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders. I've spent my whole life letting other people make my choices. My father chose my education, my career, my future. Society chose my behavior, my companions, and my expectations. I've been a puppet, Sibella, a perfectly controlled, perfectly empty puppet. His voice cracked. And you're the first thing I've ever chosen for myself, the first thing that's ever been mine. And I will not let anyone take that away. Not your father. Not society. Not even you. She broke. The last of her resistance crumbled, and she fell into his arms, sobbing against his chest. I'm scared, she confessed. I'm so scared. I know. He held her tighter. So am I. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. Lady Helena watched them in silence. When Sibella finally lifted her head, the Dowager Duchess was smiling. Well, she said, it seems we have a battle to plan. The battle began that afternoon. Lady Helena sent word to Lord Ashford that his daughter would not be returning to Briarwood, and that any public denunciation would be met with the full weight of the Thornwood family's influence. It was a declaration of war, elegant and unmistakable. Lord Ashford's response arrived within hours. Not a letter this time, but an appearance. Sibella was in the drawing room with Kaelin when the butler announced her father. Lord Ashford swept in, red-faced with fury, Lady Morwenna gliding behind him like a venomous shadow. "Sibella," her father's voice trembled with rage, "you will come home this instant." "No." The word came out stronger than she expected. "I won't." "You dare defy me? After everything I've done for you, after— What have you done for me?" Sibella rose, years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. "You let her erase me. For 7 years, you watched her dress me in colors that washed me out, steer me away from every opportunity, and tell me I was a burden and a failure. You heard her," her voice cracked. "You heard her call me invisible, and you did nothing. That's not— Morwenna was only trying to destroy me." Sibella turned to her stepmother, who stood in rigid silence. "That's what you wanted, isn't it? Me gone, erased. So Honoria could shine without competition." "Competition?" Lady Morwenna's laugh was brittle. "You were never competition. You were an embarrassment. A plain, awkward reminder of the wife your father should have forgotten. I did you a kindness, shaping your expectations to match your abilities." "You did yourself a kindness?" Kaelin's voice cut through the room, cold as winter. "You tried to bury her so your own daughter could succeed. But you miscalculated, Lady Morwenna. Because I heard you. That day at Briarwood, when you told your husband to send her away. I heard every word." Lady Morwenna's face went white. "The Duke of Velmore was in your parlor," Kaelin continued, each word precise, "and he listened to you call your stepdaughter a burden, a failure, an obstacle. He listened to you plot to banish her to Northumberland like a shameful secret. And he decided then and there that someone needed to save her from you." "This is absurd," Lord Ashford blustered. "Sibella, whatever this man has told you—" "He told me the truth." Sibella's voice steadied. "Which is more than you've ever done. She's turned you against your own family." Lady Morwenna's composure cracked, revealing something ugly beneath. "This scheming, ungrateful— Choose your next words very carefully." Kaelin stepped forward, and something in his expression made Lady Morwenna recoil. "Because if you finish that sentence, I will ensure that every drawing room in London knows exactly what kind of woman you are. I will ruin you so thoroughly that you won't be able to show your face at a country assembly, let alone a season ball." Silence, thick and suffocating. "You wouldn't dare," Lady Morwenna whispered. "The scandal would touch your family far more than mine. I am a duke, Lady Morwenna. My word carries weight. And I have witnesses to your treatment of Sibella, your servants, your staff, people who have watched you diminish her for years. Do you really want to test me?" Lord Ashford's face had gone gray. "Sibella, please, be reasonable. This man is manipulating you." "This man is the only person who has ever seen me." Sibella moved to stand beside Kaelin, their shoulders touching. "He's the only one who ever fought for me. And I'm going to marry him, with or without your blessing." The words hung in the air, final and irreversible. Lord Ashford stared at her, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw something that might have been regret. Then Lady Morwenna's hand closed on his arm, and it vanished. "Then you're no daughter of mine," he said hollowly. "I haven't been your daughter for 7 years." Sibella kept her voice steady, though her heart was breaking. You just didn't notice." They left. The door closed behind them with a sound like a tomb sealing. Sibella stood in the silence, trembling, feeling the weight of what she'd just done settle over her. Kaylin's arms came around her from behind, solid and warm. "You were magnificent," he murmured against her hair. "I'm terrified." "I know. But you're not alone anymore." He turned her to face him. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. That's what I promised. That's what I meant." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his steadiness. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now?" He kissed her forehead. "Now we plan a wedding." The engagement announcement appeared in the Times 3 days later. Lord Kaylin Thornwood, Duke of Velmore, to Miss Sibella Ashford, daughter of Lord Hadrian Ashford. The wedding to take place at St. George's, Hanover Square. The ton exploded. Every drawing room in London buzzed with speculation. Who was this Ashford girl? How had she captured the most elusive bachelor in England? Was it a love match or a scandal-forced arrangement? The theories multiplied like rabbits. She'd compromised him. He'd compromised her. It was a business arrangement. It was madness. It was the romance of the century. Through it all, Kaylin remained steadfast. He escorted Sibella to every event, introducing her as his fiancée with unmistakable pride. He danced with her, laughed with her, looked at her, in a way that made even the most cynical observers pause. But the whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder. Sir Aldrich Vane made sure of that. Sibella encountered him at the Pembroke soirée a week after the announcement. She was standing near the terrace, momentarily alone, while Kaylin spoke with a group of lords, when that familiar voice slithered into her ear. Miss Ashford, or should I say, the future Duchess of Velmore. Sir Aldrich's smile was poison wrapped in silk. "Congratulations on your conquest." "Sir Aldrich," she kept her voice cool, "I have nothing to say to you." "No? That's a shame, because I have quite a lot to say about you." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "I've been doing some research, you see, into your family's finances. Did you know your father is nearly bankrupt? That Lady Morwenna's dowry is the only thing keeping Briarwood afloat?" Sibella's blood ran cold. "I thought that might interest you." His smile widened. "So here's what I think happened. You came to London with nothing. No fortune, no prospects, no hope. And somehow, you convinced the Dowager Duchess to take you in. Maybe you played on her sentiment for your dead mother. Maybe you simply got lucky. But once you were here, you saw an opportunity. The Duke, lonely and isolated. Vulnerable to a pretty face and a sad story. That's not. The question is whether Thornwood knows the truth." Sir Aldrich's eyes glittered. "Whether he knows he's marrying a penniless opportunist whose family will drain his fortune the moment the wedding's over. My father has nothing to do with this engagement." "Doesn't he?" "Because I've heard rumors that he's already approached Thornwood's solicitor, asking about settlements, about financial support for his beloved daughter's family estate." Sir Aldrich tutted. "It would be quite the scandal if that became public knowledge. The Duke's new bride, using him to rescue her fortune-hunting family." Sibella felt the ground tilt beneath her. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Ask Thornwood. Ask him if your father has made contact. Ask him what price he's demanding for giving his blessing." Sir Aldrich stepped back, satisfaction written across his face. "You've played the game well, Miss Ashford, but the game isn't over yet." He vanished into the crowd. Sibella stood frozen, her mind racing. Was it true? Had her father approached Kaylin's solicitor? Had he demanded money in exchange for his blessing? A blessing she'd already rejected, that she'd told him she didn't need? She found Kaylin on the terrace, alone, staring out at the darkened gardens. "We need to talk," she said. He turned. and something in her expression must have alarmed him, because he immediately guided her to a secluded corner, away from prying eyes. What happened? Are you hurt? Sir Aldrich. She forced herself to meet his eyes. He said my father contacted your solicitor. He said my father is trying to extract money from you, that he's demanding settlements, financial support. Sibylla, is it true? The silence was answer enough. Her stomach dropped. Why didn't you tell me? Because it doesn't matter. His hands found hers. Your father sent a letter 2 days ago, demanding compensation for his loss of your dowry and contribution to the family. I refused. You refused. Of course I refused. I'm not marrying you to buy your family's approval. I'm marrying you because I love you. His grip tightened. What your father does is irrelevant. You are not responsible for his greed. But people will think. Sir Aldrich said he'd spread rumors. Let him. Kaelin's voice hardened. Sir Aldrich Vane is a desperate man looking for any weapon he can find. He wanted you, and he didn't get you. And now he's trying to destroy what he can't have. He wanted my supposed fortune. He didn't want me. He didn't deserve you. Kaelin cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Sibylla, listen to me. I knew about your family's finances before I ever met you. My solicitor investigated the Ashfords the moment I decided to intervene. I know your father is in debt. I know your stepmother married him for his title, not his money. I know that you bring nothing to this marriage but yourself. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Then why? Because yourself is everything. His voice cracked. Don't you understand? I have money. I have titles. I have estates and influence and everything society values. But I had nothing that mattered until I met you. You are not a transaction. You are not a strategic alliance. You are the woman I love, and I would marry you if you were a penniless orphan, with nothing but the clothes on your back. Kaelin, I should have told you about your father's letter. I was trying to protect you, but I see now that was wrong. So here's the truth, all of it. Your father wants money. Society thinks you're a fortune hunter. Sir Aldrich is going to spread every rumor he can invent, and I don't care about any of it. He pressed his forehead to hers. The only thing I care about is whether you still want to marry me. Of course I want to marry you. She laughed through her tears. I've never wanted anything more. Then nothing else matters. He kissed her, soft and fierce. Let them talk. Let them whisper. We know the truth, and the truth is that I chose you. Not your family, not your fortune, not anything, but you. I chose you too. She gripped his coat, pulling him closer. And I'll keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life. Promise me. I promise. He held her in the darkness, and for the first time in weeks, the fear receded. The whispers were still out there, the threats still looming. But they were together. And together, they could face anything. The wedding was planned for 3 weeks hence. In that time, the gossip reached a fever pitch, then slowly, inexorably began to fade. Other scandals emerged. They always did. And the ton's attention shifted to fresher prey. Sir Aldrich's rumors found some purchase, but they were met with a wall of thornwood influence that proved impenetrable. The Dowager Duchess made it known, through 100 subtle channels, that anyone who slandered her future daughter-in-law would find themselves unwelcome in any home of consequence. Lady Morwenna and Lord Ashford retreated to Briarwood, their social ambitions in tatters. Honoria's debut was postponed indefinitely. No family would risk allying themselves with people who had so publicly opposed a duke. Sibylla found she felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even regret. They had made their choices. She had made hers. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and drizzling. the kind of weather that would have seemed ominous in a fairy tale. But Sibella, standing before the mirror in her wedding gown, felt only calm. "You look beautiful," Lady Helena said, adjusting the veil. "Your mother would be so proud. I wish she could be here. She is here." Lady Helena touched her heart. "In everything you've become, in the courage you've shown, in the love you've found." Her eyes glistened. "Isabel always believed in love, you know. Real love, the kind that demands sacrifice and rewards with joy. She would have been thrilled to see you find it." The church was filled with flowers and candlelight, and faces that blurred into a single impression of witness. Sibella walked down the aisle alone. Her father had refused to attend, and she had no one else to give her away. But Caelan was waiting at the altar, and when she saw his face, nothing else mattered. He looked at her like she was the sun, the moon, every star in the sky. He looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. "You came," he murmured as she reached him. "Did you doubt I would?" "Never." He took her hands. "Not for a moment." The ceremony was brief, traditional, the words echoing through the vaulted space. To have and to hold. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. But it was the vows they'd written themselves that mattered most. "I vow to see you," Caelan said, his voice steady, "every day, in every moment. I vow to never let you feel invisible again. I vow to choose you, over duty, over expectation, over everything the world says I should want. You are my choice, Sibella, my only choice. And I will spend every day of my life making sure you never doubt it." Sibella blinked back tears. "I vow to stand beside you," she said. "Not behind you, not in your shadow, but beside you, as your equal and your partner. I vow to challenge you when you're wrong and support you when you're right. I vow to love you not because you saved me, but because you saw me. And I vow to keep choosing you every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." The rings were exchanged. The words were spoken. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Caelan kissed her, and the church erupted in applause, and Sibella Thornwood, Duchess of Velmore, stepped into her new life with her head held high. 2 years later, the gardens at Velmore House were in full bloom, roses climbing every trellis, lavender scenting the summer air. Sibella sat on a bench beneath the old oak tree, a book open in her lap, watching her husband chase their daughter across the lawn. Isabel, named for her grandmother, was 18 months old and had inherited her father's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She shrieked with laughter as Caelan caught her, swinging her up into his arms and pressing kisses to her chubby cheeks. "Papa." The word was still new, still miraculous. "More. More. You're insatiable, little one." But he set her down and let her run again, his face alight with a joy that still surprised Sibella, even after 2 years. This was the man society called cold, distant, unreachable. They had never known him at all. He caught her watching and crossed the lawn to join her, settling beside her on the bench. "What are you thinking about?" "How different everything is." She leaned into him, his arm coming around her shoulders. 2 years ago, I was being sent away to Northumberland. I thought my life was over. And now? Now I'm a duchess with a daughter and a husband who looks at me like I hung the moon. She turned to meet his eyes. "How did this happen?" "You already know the story." "Tell me again." He smiled, that private smile that belonged only to her. "I was at Briarwood Manor to sign some papers. I heard a woman call her stepdaughter invisible, and I thought—" He paused, choosing his words. "I thought that no one should ever feel invisible, that someone should tell her she mattered." "And did you tell her she mattered?" I tried. His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. But she didn't believe me at first. She was too wounded, too wary. So I had to keep showing her, day after day, until she finally understood. What did she understand? That she was never invisible, that she was extraordinary, that the people who couldn't see her were blind, not her. His voice dropped. And that I would spend the rest of my life making sure she never doubted her worth again. Sibella's throat tightened. She sounds very fortunate. She sounds much loved. Isabel came running back, demanding to be lifted, and the moment dissolved into laughter and sticky fingers and the beautiful chaos of family life. Later, after their daughter was asleep and the house was quiet, Sibella stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the moonlit gardens. Kalen came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking now?" "I received a letter today, from my father." He went still. What did it say? That Honoria is engaged. To a Viscount's younger son, not the brilliant match Lady Morwenna had hoped for, but respectable. He wanted me to know. She paused. He also said he was sorry. Do you believe him? I don't know. Maybe. It doesn't change anything. No. Kalen's arms tightened around her. It doesn't. They stood in silence, watching the shadows move across the garden. "I've been thinking," Sibella said finally, "about how many choices brought us here. Your choice to intervene. My choice to accept your mother's invitation. Our choice to love each other, despite everything. And I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, even the scandal and the gossip and Sir Aldrich's poison." She turned in his arms to face him. "Because it led me here, to you, to Isabel, to a life I never dared to imagine. You deserve every bit of it. So do you." She reached up to touch his face. "You were as invisible as I was, in your own way, hiding behind duty and distance, never letting anyone close. We saved each other, Kalen." "We chose each other," he corrected softly. "That's different. More important." "Yes." She rose on her toes to kiss him. "We chose each other." Outside, the moon climbed higher, casting silver light through the window. Somewhere in the nursery, their daughter slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams small children dream. The house settled around them, old timbers sighing, the familiar sounds of a home that had finally learned to breathe again. And Sibella Thornwood, once invisible, once erased, once told she would never amount to anything, stood in the arms of the man who had seen her when no one else would. The man who had fought for her when she didn't know how to fight for herself. The man who had chosen her over and over again until she finally believed she was worth choosing. She had come so far from the girl who walked with her shoulders hunched, trying to take up as little space as possible. That girl still lived inside her somewhere, would always live inside her. But she no longer ruled. She no longer dictated what Sibella could want, what she could have, what she could be. Now there was only this: a husband who loved her, a daughter who needed her, and a future that stretched out before them, bright with possibility. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I know." He smiled. "I love you too. Now and always." The moon continued its journey across the sky. The roses nodded in the night breeze, and in the master bedroom of Velmore House, two people who had found each other against all odds held on tight, grateful for every choice that had brought them here. Because some storms, it turned out, were worth weathering. Some choices were worth fighting for, and some loves, the real ones, the impossible ones, the ones that required courage and sacrifice, and choosing each other every single day. Those were worth everything. Thank you for staying with Sibella and Kalen until the very end. Their story began with a stepmother's cruelty, and a duke's unexpected intervention. But it became something more, a testament to the power of being truly seen and the courage it takes to choose love over fear. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because there are more stories waiting. More impossible loves, more hard-won choices, more moments that remind us why we believe in happily ever after. Thank you for being here. You're the reason these stories exist,